You're light.
Well, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of WA This Week. And first up, you'd recall from previous podcasts that we were going to have a by-election in Rockingham. The Premier, the former Premier, the Honourable Mark McGowan had resigned, and that seat had to be filled, or the vacancy had to be filled. We had an outstanding candidate in that seat from the Liberal Party, Peter Hudson, and look, a really interesting outcome in that election. First up, a huge swing away from the Labor Party in that election. Now, look, part of that's to be expected. Mark McGowan was extremely popular as a local member, and in particular, as we've discussed a few times, the referendum, if you like, of the 21 election on the handling of COVID was massively in favour of Premier McGowan, and in fact, what we saw even continuing out until he resigned was that he maintained very high popularity, and that went down. But worryingly for the Labor Party, a large swing back. And I really characterise this as probably taking us back to 2017. Now, that wasn't, we'd lost government in 2017, but a fundamental change. But I'll tell you what I really took out of the whole campaign. I spent a good deal of time down there. I was visited 3 times before the election, now the pre-poll, and spent most of the day down there on the Saturday. And the feedback I got from Liberal supporters in particular is that, we're heading in the right direction, and they're very upset, and this is more generally than just Liberal supporters. People are really upset about the core issues that government are responsible for, whether it's law and order, that massive deterioration, where we see this huge increase in violent crime under this Labor government, the health system really in chaos. I'm sure any of you that have got loved ones who are waiting for surgery, who can't afford to go in and pay privately, would know just the chaos that exists in the hospital system, and if you have to turn up to emergency and you're waiting to be treated. Whether it's schools, whether it's housing. I mean, we continue with this debacle where people can't get housing, and you've got people obviously in the most serious position where they're living rough on the streets, but many people are couch surfing, cribbing beds in caravans and the like, and all under the watch of this Labor government who are heading into 7 years in office. And so that was a big swing and a clear message to the Labor government that, they need to lift their act. And as I say, from the Liberals party's point of view, also, a clear message saying, look, you guys are heading in the right direction. Now, we know there's a lot of work to do. We don't take it for granted, and we don't think that this is just some, easy ride into the next election. We know we've got to work hard. We know we've got to have great policies. We know we've got to have great candidates, and I'm confident we're going to do that. There's an enormous amount of work going on in the party in that direction, and that's going to continue. But look, congratulations to Peter Hudson. He did a fantastic job in that election, a really impressive young man, and someone who I sincerely hope in the future has a career in Parliament, because he would have been a great representative for the seat of Rockingham. Look, that wasn't to be, and we knew that was unlikely to be the case, given that this is the safest Labor seat in Australia. But certainly someone who's an excellent individual and did an excellent job. So thanks, Peter. Thanks to all those people that supported us. And I hope the Labor government gets the message. Not confident on that one. The West Australian newspaper has been, talking a lot about the arrogance of the now Cook Labor government, all too evident. And any of you that followed it would have seen that in the behaviour and commentary of some of the ministers around this election. But look, back to normal matters now. One issue that did come up during the week, there's a group called Shalom House that help people who really are doing it tough. People, they have a program that they run for people who are drug addicted, and they have an enormous success rate. They are very effective in turning people's lives around, and they do this in a really holistic way. I've actually visited their centre out at Middle Swan and seen the work they do, had a chance to talk to people there and the staff, and I was really genuinely impressed with the work that they do. They were trying to set up a new centre, but a new drug rehabilitation centre in Craigie. It was previously used as a or for other purposes, and it looked like it was reasonably well placed. But look, there was a lot of consternation in the community, and I can understand when people sort of look at these things at face value, they get concerned about it, and the council then got concerned about it, and that was turned down. But look, I really hope that Geelong do get the opportunity to build a centre. Now, clearly this one in Craigie that opportunity has gone by, but I do hope there is good support for them. I genuinely do think that the work they do is outstanding, and just seeing people's lives turn around in a much higher proportion. Typically, drug rehabilitation is not so effective, and yet they seem to have a very effective formula. And the way they treat people, I think, is a very human, decent way that they do it. So, look, I hope that something does come to pass, and I hope in future when people look at those developments, they look at it objectively. And I'd encourage anyone who, if you're in that situation, actually engage with Geelong, go out and look at what they do out at Middle Swan, and I think it'd be hard not to be impressed by what they achieve with the resources they've got. Interesting, a lot of debate coming up at the moment about access to, or at least applications that are used where there may be national security implications, in particular TikTok and WeChat. Now, the state government makes some moves following federal government moves to ban politicians and staff using TikTok on their government devices. And one of the things I've done, is to make sure that we don't have that installed on a personal device. We do use that platform, but we have that on a burner phone so that we don't. It doesn't have access to any of the networks that I use in my formal job. It doesn't have access to emails, contact lists and the like. It's just a phone specifically only for that purpose. And we've encouraged the government to do that. And it's still not clear whether the state government has said that the staff shouldn't be using the TikTok on their personal phones. And because most of you know from your own work, most people in government, most people in politics actually use personal phones, for their communication. And they use that for internal communication. They have contacts there. They have access to government websites and the like. And concerns have been raised by a federal parliamentary inquiry about WeChat as well, and they're saying effectively it has the same security risks as TikTok. So I think it's time for the state government to take action on that. And as I say, in particular, they need to make sure that ban extends to people's personal phones that they're using for work purposes. Because it's clear based on the Senate inquiry that they perceive, and this was Greens, Liberal and Labor. It was a cross-parliament group, so it wasn't just a partisan view. That there are genuine security risks for people in government using those platforms on devices that have access to contact lists and have access to government websites and the like. Another matter I wanted to talk about, I can tell you, I found this really disturbing. There's a group called Disrupt the Burrup Hub who are, let's be frank, they're a bunch of green left-wing extremists. And, they want to shut down our gas industry. They want to shut down downstream processing of gas. I just get so frustrated with the complete ignorance behind these sorts of movements, no regard for the well-being of our society, no regard for the well-being of individual households. They have this sort of umbrella where they say somehow they're protecting the environment. Anyone who looks at the issue of transitioning away and transitioning to renewable energy, one knows it is not trivial. It is extremely complex. It's extremely hard to do that. And it's going to take time. But two, natural gas, and natural gas from Western Australia, is one of the key enablers for that to happen. Simple reason, carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions from natural gas are 1/2 of the emissions from coal. So if you transition from coal to gas, and on the East Coast, for example, 60% of their energy comes from coal, if you do that, you immediately halve your greenhouse gas emissions. And that gives us time to develop the other technologies to complete that transition. Now, we'll talk about another time. I think we should actually do a podcast on this just alone, on this whole area of the transition, because, people have, a lot of people have a heartfelt belief, it's a sort of almost a spiritual belief, if you like, that this should be done, and you should transition it away, but utterly no comprehension of the magnitude of the task. Now, I am a technical person. I've got a PhD in chemistry and I've worked in industry for 24 years. So I do have, a good handle on the technical side of this, but also the practical side of how you do this and how you can transition to fundamentally new technologies. It's extraordinarily hard. The cost is eye-watering. I won't go on about that. We'll do that separately, because at the most basic level, aspirations that are being set are unachievable. But, for this group who, look, if they want to protest outside offices, they're letting off stink bombs in the corporate offices. What a disgrace. How disgraceful to do that to people, to assault people, because that's what it is. It's assault of people. If I did that in someone's home or anywhere else, I would be charged with assault, and I should be if I was doing something as stupid as that. But then to go around to Meg O'Neill's house, and apparently with the aim to invade the house, to graffiti her residence where her partner and a child lived, and intimidating them, and let's be frank, threatening them. What an absolute disgrace. These people are extremists. They deserve no support from anyone. They should be put in jail for their behaviour. And this is just appalling behaviour by those individuals. And what's really disturbing to hear is that apparently Four Corners reporters were in tow with these people. I mean, imagine that. Now, this is a national broadcaster. Four Corners should have been ringing the police. This is not just some protest at an office where you say, well, the media might turn up and they don't have to tell anyone about it. These are people intending to intimidate, to cause concern, and so we hear, apparently, to invade the Meg O'Neill's residence and graffiti it. And our national broadcaster, paid for by you, is going along, and you can't help but think that that's encouraging them when they've got a broadcaster in tow with them. And as I say, this is fundamentally different to the media turning up and just reporting on a normal event. This is a premeditated, planned event by our national broadcaster, by Four Corners. So it'll be fascinating to see where Four Corners goes on this, on the ABC. You'd know, anyone that follows my stuff knows, I'm a keen supporter of the role that the national broadcaster has to play, particularly in regional areas. But this is beyond the pale. But I'll go back to these protesters. These people are extremists. They have no care for you. They have no ultimate care. What they're proposing is not some sensible transition to renewables. What they're proposing is the destruction of our way of life. And I don't think I'm being too dramatic in that. If we followed what they're proposing, we would utterly destroy our economy. Probably most people in Australia would be unemployed. Our economy would be in utter chaos. These people are not, just sort of pale-eyed idealists. They're extremists and really unacceptable behaviour. Look, you can guess I'm pretty upset about that behaviour, but I really am. And I might say, at a personal level, Meg O'Neill is an outstanding individual, a really first-rate. I think she's actually a model for CEOs in the way that she conducts herself, and I think she does a fantastic job, and really disappointing to see her treated in this way and her family treated in this way. But look, thanks very much for listening. Otherwise, don't forget you can subscribe to this app, and look, you can see the live version. You're obviously seeing it now, but if you get the message, it's on Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok. Just search Dr David Honey. Please share it with your friends. Really appreciate that, getting the message out. And this is live, obviously, right now, so really happy to answer any of your questions. Otherwise, really appreciate your comments and feedback. Thank you.
All right. Well, we do have a few questions, but before, just a couple of comments from the audience on what you said, that the last thing had to do with Meg O'Neill. which is good job, David Honey, for calling this out. I respect you for doing that. And someone else saying, fully agree with everything you say, sir.
Oh, thanks. It's God.
All right. First question, well, kind of an interestingly worded question. It says, I have a question. As a Labour voter, I was expecting a drop in support.
Yeah, well, there was a significant drop in support for the Labor Party. The primary vote dropped, and the two-party preferred vote dropped. As I've said, if you actually look at the results, it's effectively returned to the sort of 2017 level. Now, that was not a high watermark for us. 2017 was, a poor result for the Liberal Party. But what I did, well, one, the results say it. But two, the time I spent there talking to people is people are seeing that the Liberal Party is on track to be a credible alternative government. And that's key for us, obviously. So, if you're a student of politics, you would know oppositions are never elected. I don't think that's ever happened in the history of politics. Governments are sacked. By and large, people are pretty fair-minded. If they think a government's doing a reasonable job, they re-elect them. But the community sacks governments when they think they're failing. And what's really clear is they're forming a view that this Labor government should be sacked, and they're forming a view that the Liberal Party, with our national colleagues, are a credible alternative. Now, as I say, one swallowed is not a summer mate, as the old saying goes. This was a solid result for the Liberal Party. And I might say, just in terms, there's been some commentary on that sort of two-party preferred vote. We had two really strong independent candidates. We had the deputy mayor and another councillor, both popular figures in Rockingham, running as independents. In particular, the deputy mayor, Hayley, was a really impressive young woman. I've said that before on this podcast, and had been overlooked by the Labor Party. And I know a lot of Labor members were really upset that they would choose to put effectively a head office operative into that seat instead of someone who was a genuine local, very well-qualified young woman into that seat. So there's no doubt whatsoever that they took a significant number of votes away from Peter Hudson because they were popular independent candidates. But what we saw in the two-party preferred vote was a really strong return. I mean, essentially, around a 20% improvement in our two-party preferred vote. Now, I think that's a genuine reflection there of that strong, solid support. Now, Rockingham, as I said, I think it's the safest Labor seat in Australia, but I am confident that we will have a much better showing at the next election. As I say, keep on saying it, take nothing for granted, but I am confident that we're going to see a significant return. And this election result was an indication that things have turned around.
Jen says, the container trucks are getting worse down in the Frio area. Is the Labour Party going to do anything about it? Leach Highway and Stop Road intersection is very bad, and it takes the trucks 2 sets of light to get through.
Yeah, look, I drive down there pretty regularly, and it's pretty intimidating, isn't it? When you've got trucks, which is why the Liberal Party proposed the railway to take those trucks off Leach Highway and South Street, and the Labor government here to see, I just get fascinated by the hypocrisy of this Labor Party. They said they wanted to stop the railway because 0.19, so 1/5 of a hectare of clearing was going to be done to push that road through. So what did they do instead? They built this ludicrous, enormous roundabout at the end of Stirling Highway where it intersects with Leach Highway. They knocked down 70 mature gum trees. 70 huge. Any of you remember that area? You'd remember huge gum trees, nesting sites, feeding sites for cockatoos and a whole range of other birds on the edge of the golf course. They took a big swag of the golf course out to put a roundabout in, which was part of their solution. Directed all of the traffic off Roe Highway down past Murdoch Hospital, between Murdoch University and the hospital, for God's sake. That's where you want trucks, isn't it? Between a university and a whole hospital site. And then, with their outer harbour proposal, they're going to demolish between 60 and 120 hectares of seagrass in Cockburn Sound to avoid 1/5 of a hectare of clearing for the Roe Highway, Roe 8 extension, so that we could get trucks into Freo and get them off those main roads. What an absolute hypocritical farce from the Labor Party. And yes, look, I'm sorry I can't offer you any solace on this one. It is an appalling decision by the Labor Party to stop that original project. And what a joke. They're going to spend billions and billions. They say $6 billion. Let me tell you, this is like Metronet. They said it was going to be $3 billion. It's up to 12 now, with minimal changes to the scope. Essentially the same project. They say $6 billion. This outer harbour, once you do all of the other ancillary work around it, is going to be something. It'll be a $12 billion plus investment of your money. This is taxpayer money because they want to do it all themselves and keep it in the hands of government. They're going to do that when Fremantle Harbour is at 1/3 capacity. It is just utterly dumbfounding. And imagine what could be done with that money for homelessness, for reducing hospital wait times, and ambulance ramping, to actually develop meaningful projects such as the Port at Oakajee, so that we can develop new industries and really enliven the whole community in Geraldton with a massive investment of new industries up there. Anyway, I'm sorry about that, and it is really concerning. And by the way, any solution to the outer harbour is years and years away. It's probably a decade away. So what a muck up. And as I say, what a hypocritical decision by the Labor Party.
Julia, in reference to the demonstration that you were talking about, says these people are terrorists. Green Party need to be destroyed. They are lunatics and they don't respect anyone.
Yeah, look, I think they sort of have this guise of, oh, well, they're well-meaning and they're thinking of you. No, they're extremists. Their views have no basis in reality, and what they're proposing, what they're proposing would utterly destroy the lives pretty well of most Western Australians if you went down their path. If you just stopped all the gas, stopped all the current coal-fired stations in Collie and relied on renewables, every heavy manufacturing industry in the state would shut down. It would shut down a large part of mining. Just be utter chaos. They don't care. They are extremists. They don't care. They have just got themselves in. I think they behave hysterically. I heard one of the activists on the ABC talk back this morning with Nadia, some young woman from this Disrupt Borough group, explaining it was, to listen to it, you could hear the extremeness in this woman's voice in terms of what they were proposing. So, yeah, you did right. I hope, and I'm going to do everything I can to encourage the government to take the hardest possible line on this. This needs to be stamped out. People can protest with this idea. We hear, apparently, sometime in the next couple of weeks, this group intend to shut down the freeway. Well, every single person that engages in that sort of activity goes to jail. This is unacceptable. They can make their views known quite readily, especially these days with social media. Anyone can make their views known, but these people are extremists, and we shouldn't tolerate them.
Local question here saying Cottesloe station needs an upgrade to make it more wheelchair friendly.
Look, it is a real issue in terms of. I think that station is actually quite run down. We see a lot of money spent on other railway stations, and especially. And I expect we'll see more density in the Cottesloe town centre, something which I support. I think it's appropriate if you're going to build apartments that you put them in these existing town centres where you're not impacting normal residential areas and where you are on a railway station, and where there are plenty of businesses and cafes and supermarkets and the like to support that. So, and I'm really hoping to follow that up as well. It's certainly very steep ramps into that area, and look, I will actively pursue the minister, and I will thanks for the prompt on that, and I will follow up with the minister on what improvements we can expect at the station.
All right. From TikTok, speaking about the by-election, there were two Labour candidates in that election. Actually, a very disappointing result for the Libs.
Look, I'm not sure of the connection between the two. The Labor candidate, the independent candidate at least, who had been passed over by the Labor Party, directed her preferences to the Liberal Party. But no, look, this was not a good result for Roger Cook. And any of the the hard nuts in the Labor Party that are looking at numbers, I know there's a spin that the Premier's given. It didn't sound very convincing, I might say, when I was listening to him on TV and radio. But look, no, there's no doubt this was not a good result for the Labor Party. And, as I say, I think that two-party preferred vote really illustrates the swing away from the Labor Party. It wasn't a good result for them. Am I saying this is somehow heralding, the government's going to change tomorrow? No, I'm not saying that. But anyone in Labor that tries to put a spin on this, that this was a good result for them, I think that is just not factually supported. Look, and I thought the way honestly, I could not understand why the Labor Party passed over Hayley, who ran as an independent. She was a very, very well qualified person for that role. And I might say a lot of Labor Party people that I talked to at the booth, they were really cranky with the Labor Party for the decision they made. It's a worry when the Labor Party's driven by, hardline union decisions and not what's good for a local community.
On TikTok also, polls are looking good for the WA Libs. Slowly catch a monkey, they say.
Yeah, look, I think that's right. Look, you'd be a mug if you sort of reacted to every poll and sort of suddenly heralded, that this was some sort of victory. There's only one, as the old saying goes, there's only one poll that counts, and that is the election itself. And there's a long time to go. It's March 25. The next election, so that's prescribed. It's a fixed date, so it's a long way to go. But I was really pleased by the response from the public in that community, and I think that reflects generally across the state. I get out and about, and then I get a similar response. Look, we know there's a long journey ahead. We know that we've got to conduct ourselves properly. We've got to have great policies. We've got to have good candidates to be a credible alternative. We're working hard on that, and it is pleasing to see that turn around. I said before on this podcast, there was this sort of like a COVID veil over Western Australian politics that went with Mark McGowan, and there were a lot of Liberals who continued to strongly support Mark McGowan, and of course in the last election that translated into a massive support for the Labor Party. But I did on the booth I was at, that I spent most of my time at, which was in my local area, obviously my electorate. I didn't have anyone come to me and say, I'm going to vote for the Labor Party. They said, I'm going to vote for Mark McGowan. We knew that when Mark McGowan retired, we would see a reset to more normal politics. And, so that Mark McGowan and the Honourable Mark McGowan resigning from his role as Premier has heralded a return to more normal politics. Look, we're going to be held accountable for how we behave, and the Labor Party are as well.
Leslie says, glad the Liberals are not supporting the heritage laws.
Yeah, look, I've set aside some time. I'd been through the regulations that were promulgated for that bill in the time that I had when they were released, and I set aside some time in this is what we call our winter break from Parliament to go through those regs in detail. They are horrifying. I just cannot comprehend that any government or rational person thought that the regulations that were implemented were appropriate, and the delineation of what they call Tier 1, Tier 2 and Tier 3 activities where you have to get Aboriginal cultural heritage are just dumbfounding. Literally, if you were to take a bucket of sand off the beach, that would be falling into a Tier 2 activity. But I won't go through it in detail, but you're dead right. There are profound problems with this act. Criminalising people, actually, where people could go to jail even if they did something purely by accident, and having that as part of your bill, I mean, that's extreme. If you kill someone, but you do it by accident, that's an offence. But under this Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act, if you do something that damages Aboriginal cultural heritage purely by accident, so it's clear there's no intent whatsoever to do it, it's done in complete absence of knowledge that this, whatever it was, could do that, you can still go to jail. I mean, that's extreme. So yes, we need to have a fundamental rethink of all of this. Those regulations should be scrapped. There is barely a part of those regulations that I think is acceptable. So if any of you have got some spare time, go onto the website and read them. I think you will be aghast.
Spencer on TikTok says, catching up to the Labour Party. I don't know anyone in my age group or below 45 who supports the LNP. The fact the party is associated with Scott Morrison is beyond me.
Well, that's your view. Okay, I guess we could have a discussion about it, but yeah, look, it's interesting in politics. We've always seen over decades, you've tended to have a stronger support for the left, amongst younger people, and stronger support for the Liberals and Nationals amongst older people. And it was my father always used to say this thing: if you weren't a socialist before you were 20, you had no heart, and if you were a socialist after you're 20, you had no head. But I've said that to some folk and they got upset by that, but look, I haven't upset you. But look, I think that's sort of generally the way, when you're younger, you think everyone should take care of you, and as you get older, you realise you've got to take care of yourself, and that's probably a difference between the two parties. But yeah, as I said, I'm not getting ahead of myself on this one. I don't think there's been some cataclysmic change, but it's very, very clear that the electorate are getting tired of this arrogant Labor government, and they are increasingly seeing the Liberal National, and it'll be a coalition, as an acceptable alternative government. So we're going to work hard to keep that trend going.
In reference to the protests, I thought the Liberals believed in free speech.
I'm all for free speech, but I'm not all for for anyone just invading people's homes. And I've had a similar thing, not this extreme. I hasten to add right at the outset, but journalists turning up at my family home. Now, I've never ever turned down an interview with a journo. I don't think. I've always made myself accessible to journalists, but in the couple of times in my sort of political career that's happened, I made it very clear to the journalists, very happy to talk to you, and they know that. But do not come to my house. My family weren't elected. Any of you might think, oh, well, that's fine. I can tell you it's extremely intimidating for your family to be in that situation, for them to feel that somehow they have to modify everything they do, the way they behave, what they do at home, because there could be journalists lurking around. That's unacceptable. In public life, I'm quite prepared to be held accountable, and I believe I am. And I make myself available, and you don't do that. So it's not about free speech. This is about invading a person's home, and Meg O'Neill's partner and her child, it's very, very clear that it was extremely upsetting to that family. That's wrong. They shouldn't have done. So you can say what you want to say. You don't take that sort of action. That's not free speech. That's extreme, intimidating behaviour.
All right. James says we need balance back in Parliament.
Boy, do we ever, James. Yeah, it's a pretty tough gig there, but we're up to it. But, you look at it, and I can tell you, I think I may have said I can get myself into trouble with this one, but I think sometimes most of us, probably our partners, the people we marry, are our harshest critic. And I think there's a little bit in the back of our mind that thinks we need someone who's going to hold us to account. That stops us doing foolish things, or at least mitigates it. And but I think definitely in Parliament you need that. I think the Labor government, with that Aboriginal cultural heritage legislation, because they had absolutely ascendant numbers, they just jammed it through the House. Now, especially in the lower house, we got that bill 4 hours before we were debating it in Parliament. So I'm trying to read this bill as I'm trying to debate the thing in Parliament, and Then we're going through a process called consideration in detail, where you go through the bill line by line. And then they truncated that. They cut us off at midnight. We only got through part of the bill in terms of doing it in detail. Now, you sometimes it gives the government, yep, let's rip into it, let's get our agenda done. But you know what? Any sensible government listens keenly to the opposition. I mean, we don't go in there just trying to cause strife. Most of the legislation that the Labor Party puts up, we pass through Parliament, without comment. But this bill needed scrutiny. It needed more time for them to think about it and think about what they were doing, what they've come up with. This is not some sort of, I know it's been put around that people are trying to cause distress, or this is somehow some beat up on the part of the opposition. This act, and in particular the regulations, are extremely worrying. It is pitting Aboriginal people against non-Aboriginal people. It is codifying conflict, and it's financially rewarding conflict. I mean, structurally, this bill is wrong. This goes way beyond protecting Aboriginal heritage. You're monetising conflict over Aboriginal heritage with this bill, and the regulations. They're unworkable. This, as I say, look, I encourage any of you who are interested in this area, just go online and have a look at the regs. I think you'll be aghast. They are shocking. So, it really, this is why governments need a good opposition in Parliament. And, the government, where they've got complete control of the whole of Parliament, I don't actually think it helps them. I think they'd be better off if they had more opposition in Parliament, and they had to take a little bit more time to think about things. As we all know, sometimes the first thought that pops into our head isn't the right thing to do. And, that's why a strong opposition in Parliament is really important.
You have time for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, I'm far away.
All right, cool. So in relation to the heritage laws, Oz Kedden says, I feel for every farmer and landowner, it's racist and criminal. We've had some pretty bad labor.
Yeah, look, it's, and look, people throw around the word racism, and I'm not criticising that comment, but, racism, fundamentally is that you differentiate what you do based on race. Well, that's exactly what this bill does. And, I know, again, people have said, oh, well, this shouldn't be conflated with the voice. The philosophy behind this bill is identical to the philosophy behind the voice, and that is, there is a view, and it's a strongly held view amongst the left, it's a strongly held view amongst many people in the Labor Party, particularly, can I say, at the parliamentary level. I'm not talking about general Labor supporters. I think they've probably got a different view to this, but at that parliamentary level, those people that are into politics, there's a view that Australia was invaded by non-Aboriginal people. Aboriginal people didn't ever cede sovereignty, and therefore all of Australia is owned by Aboriginal people. Everything that happens in Australia should be requires the approval of Aboriginal people. Now, I fundamentally disagree with that. Whatever happened 200 years ago, we are one people, and there should be one set of rights. We should respect all heritage, and in particular, we should respect Aboriginal heritage. And I'm just shied away from that. This isn't something where it's carte blanche and people just go in and willy-nilly destroy. I mean, Aboriginal heritage is the heritage of the world. It's our collective heritage as well, and there should be proper processes in place to protect that, which there were before this bill came into place. It isn't a novel concept, but this bill goes way too far, and you're dead right. Don't worry, yes, farmers need to be worried, but if you're a grader driver, if you're a drilling contractor, if you're a fencing contractor, and don't go down that path, if you work on building sites, if you work on construction sites, if you're a property developer, if you're someone who's got a marine industry, if you're a fisher, that has a jetty somewhere, honestly, go and read the regulations and see what falls into Tier 2 and Tier 3 activities which require Aboriginal cultural heritage clearance. This bill and act is unworkable. And the government, they've sort of backed off a bit now and said they're going to go softly. The law's the law. As I've made clear again, a minister doesn't decide whether someone gets prosecuted or not. That's decided in the courts. And if this bill stays, and these regs in particular, if they stay in place, we're going to see a lot of people in court.
All right. Joe asks, live sheep exports, what are your thoughts?
Well, pretty straightforward. I think that done properly, live sheep exports are a really critical part of our agricultural industry. And I'll put this into context for you. Had a lot of commentary from politicians and others on the East Coast. You know how many sheep are exported from the East Coast, from outside of Western Australia? 2%. 98% of the sheep exports come out of Western Australia. So when you're talking about banning live sheep exports, you're talking about attacking Western Australian farmers. Why is it? Why is the big difference? On the East Coast, they eat all their sheep. In Western Australia, we don't eat all our sheep. We can only eat some because of our smaller population, and we export, them a significant number of sheep. It's a key part of the sheep industry. One, it underpins the price of sheep here. And two, it is an extraordinarily well-run industry. Now, I took the time, I think I've said to, in this forum and elsewhere, one of the jobs you do when you're in opposition is learn. So when they restarted the sheep export industry, it'll be over a couple of years ago, I went down to Fremantle, actually went down, saw them loading the ships, went on the ships, saw how the sheep were penned, spoke to the veterinarians that accompany every voyage, and talked to them about it, spoke to the people that work on the ships. I was really impressed. I mean, it's been put, and I believe it's true, that the mortality rate for sheep on those ships is lower than in the paddock. And the passion, the care of those people that run that industry was just absolutely fantastic. They, more than anyone else, they're people that care about these stock. They want them to, be treated properly and the like. But it is a key part of our industry. There has been a collapse in sheep prices in the industry. Some of you may know, I've got a family farm down at Cranbrook, and I'll try and get down there when I can. And I was down there, about 4 weeks ago, chatting to some farmers because of the this impact on the live sheep exports. Now there's an enormous number of sheep in the southwest of the state of Western Australia. There, if nothing happens in relation to making sure that we have these live sheep exports, there will be thousands of sheep that are simply shot. That could be exported safely, humanely, and then provide food for people in other countries where they don't have refrigeration. And this nonsense that somehow exported frozen meat can replace it. Live sheep go to markets where they don't have refrigeration. That's why they have live sheep exports. So, and I might say, if those countries don't get their live sheep from Australia, they will get them from countries that don't have anywhere near the good animal husbandry practices that we have here. So guess what? I support the live sheep export industry. I think we've got a group of misinformed bleeding hearts from the East Coast trying to dictate what happens to Western Australia, and we should all oppose it.
Another question from Joe says, will you overturn the ban on the timber industry?
Look, I am extremely sympathetic to a timber industry now. The Liberal Party doesn't have a formal policy on this stage, but I can tell you what's happened down in the southwest with banning this industry is utterly ridiculous. And we'll go to some basics here. Only 1/3 of the forest was subject to forestry. So 2/3 of the forest was reserved for no forestry, none whatsoever. So those, people that love the forest and whatever. And otherwise, our forest industry was the best regulated forest industry in the world, bar none. Enormous range of environmental controls to make sure that they weren't causing harm to the broader ecosystem in terms of endangered species or the like. The forests are on a 100-year cycle, and that is if they cut a copse of timber in an area, they wouldn't come back for 100 years to that same area and so on. I won't go on. There was a lot of detail available around that. So, and what have we got? This ridiculous situation down in the south at the moment. A lot of the area that was subject to forestry was replanted, but for whatever reasons, the forestry prescribed enormously high rates of replanting. And I think the idea was that they would harvest timber at various stages of maturity. Now we've got this ridiculous situation where we've got large areas, many, many thousands of hectares, where the timber density is so great. Literally, I went down there again. I get out. I don't just sit in my office and sort of listen to people tell me things. I go and look for myself. I've been down into those forestry areas, into Mandurah and Pemmitt, and spoken with a whole range of people, local farmers, foresters and others. And they've got tree densities in some areas. I went into a mature karri plantation. The trees are about 1 metre apart. You couldn't walk into it, into the area. Now, what's happened in that area? The water table's gone down about 20 metres. Trees, the creeks and the streams in that area, which I know many people are passionate about, they are dry. They would only run with water in them for a few days at the height of winter storms. Otherwise, they run dry. Whereas the trees in the normal forest, the streams in the normal forest flow, and of course that's important for the environment. So we're not even seeing thinning of the timber. This is ludicrous. We need to see, one, a major activity of thinning those replanted areas back to a normal forest level to protect the rest of the ecosystem. And otherwise, I think that a sustainable timber industry is, in fact, something that we should have in this state. How ludicrous. I said this in Parliament when the government announced this. What have we done with this decision, or what has the Labor government done with this decision? They are importing deforestation. We're still getting hardwood into Western Australia. We're just importing it from countries who do not have the forest management practices that we have.
All right, that's the end of the podcast.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much, everyone.